So in this video, we're going to really be quickly talking about the dualistic component and understanding what the dualistic component is, how it relates to the experiences of gender nuanced people, and what it actually means, okay? So what we say is that as gender nuanced people, God for us represents the all-seeing eye because God sees everybody's experiences archetypally, that we are all aspects and embodiments of God because God is infinite consciousness. And with that being said, as gender nuanced people, we have masculine and feminine, yin and yang elements that ultimately socially construct how we are as people. These are what I call our dualistic components. So these dualistic components together ultimately create a character that you embody, that you live and experience throughout your life story as you begin to just live your life. So, what I mean by that is in a biblical sense, when God talks about, or rather Yahweh talks about being upright, he's really referring to the alignment of mind, body, and spirits. And so that alignment of mind, body, and spirit is what helps to shape your understanding of your character within this sacred field of reality. So, as gender nuanced people, we ultimately understand that there are gender nuanced men that have a feminine internal essence, and there are gender nuanced women that may have a masculine internal essence. Insofar as much that we are all aspects of God, God being the union of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, we all have these dualistic components that help to shape an understanding of our identities, of our characters as human beings. And that is where our spirituality kind of ultimately emerges as gender nuanced people. It is ultimately important as a gender nuanced person to understand the breadth and the depth of your dualistic components because they're it's ultimately important for you as a gender nuanced person to understand the breadth and the depth of your dualistic components because they help to make you aware and conscious of the different experiences that you may encounter with other people. So, for example, being a gender nuanced Black person in the collective means something completely different to gay Black people than it means to Black people who grow up in the realm of cultural intelligibility, I should say. So when we begin to piece that apart and break that down, we understand why the archetype or how the archetype is ultimately shaped in the lived experiences of gender nuanced people. So, for example, Princess Fiona had a dualistic component. She was at once the untouchable and at once the trickster, right? She was a princess, but she was also an ogre at the same time, a la vez, right? So for a lot of Black people born in gender nuanced bodies, the experience is that within our own communities, this expression of gender is seen as princess like, whereas within the collective, the larger framework of what it means to be a Black man, this is seen as ogre. So Understanding your dualistic components as a gender nuanced person helps you to be able to navigate the the I guess you could say the archetypal terrain that is ultimately laid before you so that way you stay true to who you are and on your path. So at the top, you have God being the all seeing eye. So I drew like a little eye to show how God sees everybody's experience because God is infinite consciousness. And then you understand how love is wholeness, and you divide that into the masculine and the feminine qualities or the components, being the yin and the yang. And that is ultimately how a person is socially constructed. And this social constructionism, or rather, I should say, the alignment of the mind, body, and spirit, is what creates a person who is upright, a person who has good character in the biblical sense of the word upright. That is ultimately how gender nuanced people come to understand themselves and the variegation of their gender identities. Is ultimately because gender nuanced men have a feminine internal essence, gender nuanced women typically have a masculine internal essence. And so this union or this interplay of masculine and feminine features are ultimately what create a which ultimately create so this interplay of masculine and feminine features, they're ultimately what shape a person's identity and how they understand themselves as gender nuanced people. And this identity that they have, this archetype that they have, is what differentiates them from other gender nuanced people and their experiences. Because as we will learn in the next video, and other episodes is that the archetype that you have ultimately is going to differ from a person that has a completely different archetype. So not all gay people experience gayness the exact same. So that was the brief talk about dualistic components, and I will catch you all in the next video.